Have you ever felt the sharp sting of rejection, not from strangers or foes, but from the very people who should cherish you most? Your family? It's a pain unlike any other. It doesn't just wound the heart, it shakes the soul. Their absence in moments of need, their indifference to your struggles, or perhaps their outright betrayal, leaves you questioning your worth, your purpose, and even your faith. You sit in the quiet moments of despair, whispering to yourself, "Why me? Why would those who are supposed to love me most turn their backs on me?" But what if I told you that these moments of abandonment are not the end of your story? What if the pain of rejection is merely the prelude to something extraordinary? A divine orchestration designed not to crush you, but to lift you higher than you could ever imagine. In the silence of your loneliness, can you hear the faint whisper of hope? It's saying, "I will never leave you, nor forsake you." It's saying, picture the countless stories written throughout time, stories of men and women cast aside by those they loved, only to rise again in ways that defied human expectation. Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery and forgotten in prison. Yet in his darkest hour, God's hand was at work, preparing him for a position of unimaginable influence. And David, a shepherd boy overlooked by his family, mocked for his dreams, became a king chosen by the Almighty. Could it be that your rejection is not a failure but a setup for God's elevation? Now pause for a moment and reflect. What is it about rejection that cuts so deeply? It isn't merely the loss of support, it's the betrayal of trust, the crumbling of a foundation you believed was unshakable. Family is supposed to be our fortress, our sanctuary. When that sanctuary becomes a battlefield, the wound feels unbearable. But hear this truth: when the walls of human support collapse, it is then that the divine fortress stands tall, unshaken and unyielding. In moments like these, the enemy whispers lies into our hearts, telling us we are forgotten, unloved and unworthy. But those are lies meant to keep us in chains. The truth is that God has not turned his back on you. He sees every tear you've cried, every moment of hurt you've endured, and every prayer you've uttered in desperation. His plans for you are not derailed by the betrayal of others. If anything, they are strengthened by it, for in your weakness, his strength is made perfect. Now, consider this. What if this season of rejection is a season of preparation? What if, like gold refined in fire, you are being molded into something priceless, something radiant? The pain you're feeling isn't wasted. It's the chisel in the hand of the master sculptor. The rejection of men cannot override the calling of God. What was meant for harm, God can turn for your good. Do you believe that? Perhaps the most difficult truth to grasp is that the pain inflicted by others often reveals the divine nature of God's love. While human love may falter and fail, his love remains steadfast. It's in these moments of human failure that his promises shine brightest. He becomes the parent who never abandons, the friend who never betrays, the family who never turns their back. He has loveliness, perfectness, purity, loveliness, and perfectness, perhaps the closest thing to an everlasting God. So, as you sit in the midst of your pain, remember this: the absence of human support is not the absence of divine purpose. The rejection of those around you is not the rejection of God. He is still with you, still guiding you, still working all things together for your good. The question is, will you trust him? Will you believe that his plans for you are greater than the plans of those who hurt you? Take heart, for the God who lifts the brokenhearted is the same God who will lift you. The weight of rejection may feel unbearable, but it is in this very weight that God builds the strength for your next chapter. You are not forgotten, not abandoned, and certainly not defeated. Instead, you are being prepared, refined, and elevated to a place where even those who rejected you will marvel at what God has done in your life. God becomes your true refuge. There is a unique kind of pain that comes when your family turns their back on you. It's not like the rejection of strangers or the fleeting betrayal of acquaintances. It's deeper, cutting into the very essence of your being. Family is supposed to be the safe haven, the place where you can return to no matter how chaotic life becomes. But what happens when that very foundation begins to crumble? Perhaps you've shared your dreams and been met with ridicule instead of encouragement. Maybe you've endured cold indifference when you needed warmth, or faced judgment instead of understanding during your darkest moments. It may be subtle, a quiet dismissal, or it may be bold, a severing of ties that leaves you stunned and heartbroken. You feel the sting of their words, the silence that hangs heavy in the air, or the deliberate absence when you needed them the most. You might ask yourself, why don't they see me? Why won't they care? It feels personal, but often their rejection stems from their own limitations, jealousy, fear, or an inability to comprehend your journey. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. You're left feeling isolated and unloved by the very people who are meant to cherish you. Number 10. In these moments of profound hurt, God becomes your true refuge. Where human love falters, His love remains constant. He doesn't turn His back on you, even when the world does. Imagine the tenderness of a parent embracing a child who feels lost and alone. That is how God holds you. His arms are always open, His heart always inclined toward your pain. He sees the tears you cry behind closed doors, the loneliness that consumes your nights, and the questions that fill your heart, and He whispers, I am here. God's refuge is not just about protection, it's about restoration. He doesn't merely shield you from further hurt, He begins to heal the wounds already inflicted. In His presence, you don't need to explain yourself or defend your worth. He knows you fully, loves you unconditionally, and accepts you without question. The weight of trying to earn someone's approval, the pain of waiting for their love, fades in the light of His unwavering grace. It's when family deserts you, God draws closer. He surrounds you with peace that defies understanding and fills the empty spaces with His presence. You begin to realize that while human love may disappoint, His love never will. In Him, you find a home that cannot be shaken, a comfort that cannot be stolen, and a refuge that is eternal. And the woefulness of the universe may come to seem unbearable. In Him, you find a refuge that is eternal. You discover inner strength. When family turns their back on you, it feels as though the ground beneath your feet has disappeared. They were the ones you leaned on, the ones you trusted to be there when life got tough. Yet, in your moments of greatest vulnerability, they chose to walk away. It's a pain that leaves you feeling hollow, as though a piece of your heart has been ripped away. Maybe you shared your struggles only to be met with blame. Perhaps you reached out for help and were ignored. The rejection is more than just an act. It's a statement that echoes in your mind saying, you're not enough, you don't matter. This kind of abandonment can shatter your self-worth. You may find yourself questioning everything. Am I really that unlovable? Why is it so easy for them to leave? The loneliness is suffocating, and the ache in your chest feels like it will never fade. But in this place of despair, something extraordinary begins to happen. The strength you didn't know existed begins to rise within you. Life goes on. It's like an invisible rope. It wraps around your hand, and together it bears. God doesn't just offer comfort. He equips you to stand firm. He shows you that your value is not tied to how others see you, not even your family. Instead, your worth is rooted in Him. Slowly, you begin to see that the rejection you faced was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of your transformation. In your darkest moments, you discover a resilience that can only come from God. He whispers to your soul, "You are stronger than this. You are more than what they say." As you lean into Him, you find the courage to rise again, to move forward despite the pain. This strength doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives you the ability to endure, to grow, and to become someone who is unshaken by the opinions or actions of others. God doesn't waste the pain you've endured. He uses it to refine you, to build you into someone who can weather any storm. What your family intended to break you becomes the very thing that strengthens you. You realize that their rejection does not define you. God's love does, and in that love, you find a strength that no human rejection can ever take away. Doors open in your life. When family turns their back on you, it feels as though every door you once relied on has slammed shut. They were the people you expected to stand by you, to open doors of opportunity through their encouragement, connections, or guidance. Instead, their rejection leaves you in a space that feels both barren and suffocating. The absence of their support might make you feel like opportunities have vanished. Perhaps they stopped believing in your dreams or dismissed your ambitions as foolish. Their indifference can feel like a wall blocking your path forward. You may find yourself asking, if my own family can't support me, how will anyone else believe in me? How can I move forward when the people who should be cheering for me are the very ones pulling me down? It's a deep hurt that creates a sense of hopelessness. The rejection can make it seem like every avenue of success has been sealed off, leaving you stranded in the wilderness of isolation and self-doubt. But what if the closed doors are not the end, but the beginning of something far greater? God, in His infinite wisdom, often allows the doors of human support to close, so that He can open doors that no one can shut. When your family lets go of you, God takes hold of you in ways that defy human understanding. He doesn't just replace the opportunities you think you've lost. He creates new ones, far beyond what you could imagine. He creates new ones, far beyond what you could imagine. You may start noticing doors opening in unexpected places. Perhaps it's a career breakthrough you never anticipated, or a connection with someone who sees and supports your potential like no one ever has. God aligns circumstances in such a way that you know it could only be His hand at work. These new doors are not contingent on human approval. They are built on His divine purpose for your life. Through this process, you learn to trust Him more. You begin to see that rejection is not always a loss. It can be a redirection. The doors that closed were never meant to be your final destination. God's plans are always bigger, always better, and always perfectly timed. While it may not erase the pain of family turning away, it brings a new hope, showing you that He is leading you to places you never dreamed possible. Your faith deepens through adversity. Few things test your faith like being rejected by your family. They were supposed to be your first examples of love, kindness, and support, yet their actions leave you questioning everything. When family turns their back on you, it's not just an emotional blow, it's a spiritual challenge. You wonder why God allowed this to happen, why He didn't intervene. or why the very people meant to love you unconditionally could hurt you so deeply. The pain often drives you to ask hard questions. Why me? Why now? Where is God in all of this? It can feel like a spiritual drought, where the weight of their rejection clouds your ability to see God's presence. You might feel abandoned, not only by your family, but also by Him. It's a time of darkness, doubt, and despair, where the foundations of your faith are shaken. But it's in these moments of adversity that your faith begins to grow. God doesn't leave you in the darkness. Instead, He uses it as a place to deepen your relationship with Him. When family abandons you, you are left with no choice but to lean completely on Him. And as you do, you start to see Him in ways you never did before. Adversity becomes the soil in which your faith takes root and grows stronger. The pain you feel becomes the catalyst for prayer, for seeking Him with an intensity that only comes from desperation. You discover a God who is not distant but present, not indifferent but deeply involved in your healing and growth. I think this return to religion is the first step on the path towards a better life. You discover a God who is not distant but present, not indifferent but deeply involved. And through the trials, your faith matures. You begin to see His hand even in the midst of your suffering. Every unanswered question becomes an opportunity to trust Him more. Every tear becomes a seed planted for future joy. The rejection of your family doesn't weaken your faith, it refines it. And as your faith deepens, you start to realize that God's presence is more valuable than human approval. Growth is not about being approved. Growth is not you may have lost their support, but in losing it, you gained a relationship with Him that is unshakable. God sends the right people into your life. When your family turns their back on you, it feels as though the very people who were supposed to be your foundation have crumbled away, leaving you standing on shaky ground. They were the ones you expected to walk beside you through life's storms, to celebrate your victories and console you in your defeats, but instead, they became the source of your pain, abandoning you in your time of greatest need. He sighed and placed the wineglass to his lips and began to wind away in your time of greatest need. Oddly enough, the more crumbled the glass, the more it reflects the truth. For the first time, when you were supposed to walk beside you through life's storms, they reflected the truth themselves. They were the ones you expected to walk beside you through life's storms. They were the ones you reflected to walk the streets. They were not the ones you expected to walk away from. And no one you expected to walk away from. Perhaps they dismissed your struggles, accused you of things you didn't do, or refused to understand your dreams and aspirations. Maybe they chose sides in conflicts where you felt unheard or unvalued. This kind of rejection creates a void in your heart, a space once filled with the warmth of familial connection, now replaced by a chilling sense of loneliness. You might begin to believe that no one will ever truly stand by you. The betrayal of those closest to you can leave scars that make trusting others seem impossible. You ask yourself, if my own family could turn their back on me, how can I ever hope to find people who will genuinely care for me? The isolation becomes suffocating, and you start to wonder if anyone will ever fill the emptiness they left behind. But God sees your pain, and He does not leave you in the wilderness of rejection. He has a plan to surround you with people who will support, encourage, and uplift you in ways your family never could. These are not people brought into your life by coincidence. They are handpicked by God, placed in your path at just the right time to remind you that you are not alone. These people may come from unexpected places. Perhaps it's a friend who steps up when you least expect it, a mentor who believes in your potential, or even strangers who offer kindness that restores your faith in humanity. God's provision often surprises us, and the relationships He brings into our lives during these seasons of rejection are no exception. From time to time, and that's real, from time to time, we might feel that God is not there with us and that we are not enough. The people God sends are not just temporary fixes for your loneliness. They are instruments of His healing. They speak words of affirmation that rebuild your shattered confidence. They provide the kind of unwavering support that reminds you of your worth. Their presence in your life becomes a testament to God's faithfulness, showing you that He is attentive to your needs, even when others fail you. In time, you begin to see that the absence of your family's support made room for these new relationships. The void they left was not meant to remain empty. It was meant to be filled by people who truly understand, value, and love you as you are. God uses their love and care to remind you that while human relationships may fail, His provision never does. Through them, you find a new kind of family, one built not by blood, but by the hand of God. You bow to their praises and live wildly. Bow by the word, by the hand of God. Bow by the hand of people truly understand, value, and love you as you are. Rejection becomes redirection. When your family turns their back on you, it can feel as though you've hit a dead end. The people you thought would always stand by you have chosen to walk away, leaving you stranded in a place of hurt and confusion. Their rejection can make you feel like your plans and dreams have been derailed, as if their absence has pulled the rug out from under your feet. But maybe you shared your aspirations only to be mocked or dismissed, or you tried to reconcile differences, but they chose distance over unity. This rejection strikes at the core of who you are. You question if you're on the right path, if your decisions are worth pursuing, and whether you have the strength to move forward without their support. The silence of their absence is deafening, and it can lead you to believe that the doors to your future have been slammed shut. But God sees what you cannot. While rejection feels like a punishment, it is often His way of redirecting you toward a path that aligns with His perfect plan for your life. What looks like an end is in reality a divine detour. Their rejection removes distractions and forces you to rely on God for guidance. He uses what was meant to harm you to shift your focus, opening your eyes to opportunities you might have overlooked if you had stayed in the comfort of their approval. End of chapter 3. Beginnings of rejection and forces you to shift your focus, opening your eyes to opportunities you might have overlooked if you had stayed in the comfort of their approval. This redirection can be painful because it requires letting go of what you thought your life should look like. But as you lean into God, He begins to reveal a new vision, one that surpasses anything you could have imagined. The places and people you once thought were essential to your success fade into the background as He leads you toward new possibilities. You begin to see that the rejection wasn't meant to stop you. It was meant to free you from paths that were never meant to be yours. In this process, you find strength you didn't know you had. God's redirection isn't just about changing your circumstances. It's about changing you. He shapes your character, deepens your faith, and prepares you for a future that is far greater than anything your family's approval could have provided. Their rejection becomes the very thing that propels you into God's purpose for your life. Your value is defined by God, not people. The rejection of your family can leave you feeling unworthy, as though their inability to love or support you is a reflection of your value. It's an agonizing experience to seek validation from those closest to you, only to be met with indifference, criticism, or outright dismissal. Their words, actions, or absence can echo in your mind, convincing you that you're not enough, not deserving of love or respect. This rejection often creates a false narrative in your heart. You begin to tie your self-worth to their opinions, believing that if they don't see your value, perhaps no one else will either. The pain of their rejection seeps into your identity, making you question your purpose and significance. Why am I not good enough for them? Becomes a haunting question that clouds your thoughts and undermines your confidence. The restructuring keeps the rejection flowing and the search for independence once again. But their rejection does not define your worth. Only God has the authority to determine your value, and His love for you is unshakable. He created you with intention, designing every part of you with purpose and care. While people's opinions are fickle and flawed, God's view of you is eternal and unchanging. God reminds you that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, chosen, and loved beyond measure. His opinion of you does not waver based on your successes or failures, nor is it diminished by the rejection of others. In His eyes, you are His beloved child, deserving of grace, mercy, and a future filled with hope. As you let go of the need for human validation, you begin to see yourself through God's eyes. The opinions of others, even your family, lose their power to dictate your sense of self. Their rejection becomes a reminder that your identity is not rooted in what people say about you, but in what God has declared over your life. He calls you worthy, capable, and loved, and no rejection can ever change that truth. This realization is liberating. You are no longer bound by the weight of their approval or the pain of their rejection. Instead, you stand firm in the knowledge that your value comes from the One who created you, the One who will never abandon you. God's love becomes the foundation upon which you rebuild your sense of worth, unshaken by the opinions or actions of others. You witness God's justice and restoration. When your family turns their back on you, it can feel as though injustice has prevailed. You gave your love, time, and energy only to be met with coldness and betrayal. Perhaps they spread false words about you, blamed you for things beyond your control, or chose to believe lies rather than seek the truth. The pain of being misunderstood or intentionally wronged by those closest to you is like carrying an invisible wound that refuses to heal. You might find yourself wondering, why is this happening? Why doesn't God stop them? Where is His justice? Their actions may leave you feeling defeated, as if their rejection and mistreatment will go unanswered forever. It's a crushing weight to carry, the belief that those who have hurt you will never face the consequences of their actions. But God sees everything. He is a just God, and nothing escapes His notice. Every tear you've cried, every word of betrayal spoken against you, and every act of rejection you've endured is seen by Him. While it may seem like they've won in the moment, God's justice is not bound by human timing. He is patient, giving everyone the opportunity to change, but He is also righteous. He will hold accountable those who harm His children. He is also righteous. He will hold accountable those who harm His children. God's justice isn't always about punishment, it's also about restoration. He doesn't just balance the scales, He tips them in your favor. Where you've lost relationships, He brings new ones. Where you've suffered, He replaces sorrow with joy. He takes the ashes of your pain and creates something beautiful out of them. As time passes, you begin to see how God works on your behalf. Perhaps the truth about your situation comes to light, or those who hurt you face their own struggles, forcing them to reflect on their actions. More importantly, God restores you in ways that go beyond what you've lost. His justice doesn't just focus on righting wrongs. It focuses on healing you completely. In witnessing His justice and restoration, your faith deepens. You start to trust that He is always working, even when it feels like nothing is happening. You see that His justice isn't about revenge, but about bringing wholeness to your life. The pain you endured becomes a part of your story, but it no longer defines you. Instead, it stands as a testament to God's ability to restore and rebuild, even in the face of betrayal. You grow in forgiveness and grace. When your family turns their back on you, Forgiveness is often the last thing on your mind. The pain they caused feels too deep, too personal, and too deliberate to simply let go. Their rejection, their words or their actions have left scars that seem impossible to heal. You might replay their behavior in your mind, trying to make sense of how people who are supposed to love and protect you could be the source of such hurt. Perhaps they doubted you, insulted you, or blamed you for things beyond your control. Maybe they walked away when you needed them the most, or worse, they sided with others against you. Whatever the situation, the pain lingers, and the thought of forgiving them feels like condoning their actions or minimizing your suffering. But forgiveness is not about excusing their behavior. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of bitterness and anger that their actions have placed on your heart. Holding on to resentment might feel like a form of justice, but in reality, it only deepens the wound and chains you to the very pain you long to escape. God knows this, and that's why He calls you to forgive. Not for their sake, but for yours. Forgiveness doesn't come naturally, especially when the pain is fresh and the memories are vivid. It feels unnatural to let go of the hurt when every part of you wants to hold on to it. But God doesn't ask you to forgive in your own strength. He provides the grace and the ability to do what feels impossible. When you bring your pain to Him, He begins to work in your heart, softening the anger and replacing it with His peace. A peace He will take from you first, and you'll become a rich boy again. Through prayer and surrender, you'll find that forgiveness is not a single moment, but a process. It's a journey of releasing the hurt day by day, sometimes moment by moment. And as you walk this journey, you begin to see forgiveness as a gift you give yourself, a way to free your heart from the poison of bitterness. You realize that holding on to anger only keeps you tied to the very people who hurt you, while letting go opens the door to healing and freedom. Give this book a read, and you will see that any person who heals by letting go opens the door to healing and freedom. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or pretending the pain never happened. It does not mean reconciling with those who hurt you if they have not shown genuine remorse or change. Forgiveness is about releasing your heart from the burden of anger and trusting God to handle the justice. It's choosing to let go of the need for revenge and allowing Him to deal with those who wronged you in His perfect timing and way. How aware should we all be? Society and the world in great strife, and nobody knows exactly what they mean. In this process, God teaches you grace. Grace is the ability to extend kindness even when it's undeserved. It's not something you muster on your own. It's a reflection of the grace God has shown you. He reminds you that just as you have needed His forgiveness for your own mistakes and shortcomings, He calls you to extend that same forgiveness to others. This isn't about minimizing your pain. It's about stepping into a higher calling, one that reflects His love and mercy. Forgiveness and grace are transformative. They don't just heal the wounds inflicted by others. They change you from the inside out. As you let go of resentment, you'll find that the heavy burden on your heart begins to lift. The bitterness that once consumed your thoughts is replaced by peace. The anger that kept you bound loses its grip. You begin to see that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of strength. I next call to mind the time when I felt the weight of the world lighten my heart, as it worth of energy. Through this process, God draws you closer to Him. Each step of forgiveness is a step of faith, trusting that He will heal your heart and restore what was broken. You begin to experience the freedom that comes from obeying His call to forgive, and you see how His grace fills the spaces left empty by others' rejection. Although approaching this process is more painful than any abyss, there is greater joy. You begin to experience the freedom that comes from obeying His call to forgive, and you see how His grace fills the spaces left empty by others' rejection. What's even more powerful is that your act of forgiveness becomes a testimony to others. When people see the peace and strength you've gained despite the rejection you faced, they are drawn to the source of your transformation. Your willingness to forgive becomes a reflection of God's love and an example of His power to heal even the deepest wounds. It proves that forgiveness is not easy and it doesn't happen overnight. But as you take each step, trusting God to guide you, you'll discover that it's one of the most freeing and life-changing decisions you can make. It breaks the chains of bitterness, restores your joy, and opens your heart to the blessings God has prepared for you. So, as you navigate the pain of family rejection, remember that forgiveness is not about them. It's about you and your relationship with God. He will give you the strength to let go, the grace to move forward, and the peace to live free from the weight of the past. Through Him, you will grow in ways you never thought possible, turning your pain into purpose and your wounds into wisdom. God elevates you beyond expectations. When your family turns their back on you, it feels as though you've been cast into the shadows, forgotten and underestimated. The pain of their rejection can make you feel unworthy, as though their opinion of you is final, as though their disbelief in your abilities seals your fate. You may find yourself thinking, how can I rise when even the people who know me best don't believe in me? Their words, actions, or silence leave a deep imprint on your heart, convincing you that the world sees you as small, insignificant, or incapable. Perhaps they dismissed your dreams as unrealistic or mocked your efforts to better yourself. They may have chosen to prioritize others over you, ignoring your needs or devaluing your presence. The sting of being overlooked or outright rejected by family cuts deeply because it attacks the core of your identity. After all, family is meant to be your first support system, the place where you feel most safe and valued. It is when that support is withdrawn, it can feel as though you're left to navigate life's challenges completely alone. The Foster Children's Broadcasting Network is returning to the farmhouse on Saturday the 9th from 10 to 12. But here's the truth. God's plans for your life are not limited by human approval, nor are they derailed by human rejection. In fact, rejection often serves as the catalyst for God's elevation. The moments when others doubt you, underestimate you, or walk away from you are the moments when God begins to prepare a new chapter in your life, one that exceeds anything you could have imagined. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. His own brothers turned against him, throwing him into a pit and selling him into slavery. To them, Joseph's dreams were a nuisance, and they believed his rejection would put an end to his ambitions. But God had other plans. What looked like the end of Joseph's story was merely the beginning of his rise to greatness. Through betrayal, imprisonment, and adversity, God was positioning Joseph to fulfill a purpose far beyond his brother's understanding. In the end, Joseph's elevation not only silenced his doubters, but also placed him in a position to save countless lives, including those who had betrayed him. When your family turns their back on you, it may feel like the doors to your future are closing. But God is in the business of opening doors that no one can shut. He doesn't need their support to bless you, and He doesn't rely on their approval to carry out His plans for your life. In fact, their rejection often clears the path for you to focus solely on Him, to seek His guidance and trust His timing. It's in these moments of isolation and pain that God begins to work behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, people, and opportunities that will lead to your elevation. You are coming on eternal isle. God's elevation is not about proving your worth to others, though that may happen along the way. It's about fulfilling the purpose He designed specifically for you. When He elevates you, it's not temporary or dependent on external factors. It's a lasting transformation that positions you exactly where you need to be to thrive. His elevation isn't about material success alone. It's about spiritual growth, emotional healing, and a life that reflects His glory. After all that time, professional healing isn't the thing that really elevates you. It's about spiritual growth, emotional healing, and a life that reflects His glory. This elevation often comes in ways you least expect. The very areas where you were rejected might become the areas where God blesses you the most. The relationships that fell apart may be replaced by connections that nurture and uplift you. The dreams that others doubted may come to fruition in ways that far surpass your original vision. Through it all, God is not just restoring what you lost. He's exceeding your expectations, turning your pain into purpose and your rejection into redirection. Imagine this: the same family members who doubted you, dismissed you, or ignored your potential, one day witnessing the work God has done in your life. Your story becomes a testimony not only of resilience, but also of God's faithfulness. They see that their rejection didn't stop you, and their disbelief didn't define you. Instead, it became the backdrop against which God's glory shone even brighter. God's elevation isn't just for your benefit. It's for His greater purpose. He uses your story to inspire others who are walking through similar pain, showing them that rejection is not the end. He uses your testimony to reveal His power, His love, and His ability to bring beauty from ashes. What you've endured becomes a source of hope for others, proving that no matter how dark the season, God's light can break through. As you walk this journey, you'll begin to notice the transformation within yourself. The pain of rejection, while still a part of your story, no longer controls you. Instead, you find strength, peace, and confidence in the knowledge that God is working on your behalf. His elevation doesn't just change your circumstances, it changes you. It teaches you to trust Him fully, to see yourself through His eyes, and to live with the assurance that His plans for you are good. So, when your family turns their back on you, remember this: their rejection is not the final word. God has the final say, and His plans for you are far greater than you could ever imagine. He is lifting you up, not just to restore what you've lost, but to place you in a position of purpose and promise. Through Him, the pain of rejection becomes the foundation for your greatest elevation, that everything changes, and death does not destroy the foundation. The purpose and promise, through Him, the pain of rejection becomes the foundation for your greatest elevation.